Hi everyone, and welcome to this week's Make It Monday with Bob's Red Mill. My name is Matt Weinstein, aka Glass of Weinstein. Today, I'm going to show you my recipe for sweet potato gnocchi with a sage pesto. It was just Thanksgiving. I'm sure you got some sweet potatoes left over. I'm going to show you how to turn those into a delicious and surprisingly simple dish for either yourself or your family or your loved one or whomever. It's delicious. I tried this recipe a few different ways using some of Bob's Red Mill's different variations of flour. I had the most success with this one. It's the gluten-free 1-to-1 baking flour. I just found that it gave me more of that chewy elasticity that I wanted in my gnocchi. For this recipe, you're gonna need 1 large sweet potato or 2 medium. If they're looking a little more like this, some of the skinnier guys, you can use 2 of these or 1 really big guy. I have had more success with roasting my sweet potatoes. I think it adds a lot more flavor. You get beautifully caramelized versus boiling, which just kind of lets the starch all sit in itself. So I'm going to show you how I prepare it. We're going to just slice our sweet potato carefully down the middle, like that. We're going to drizzle with some olive oil and salt and pepper just to get it nice and seasoned. Don't be shy with the salt. It's going to add more flavor and help the caramelization process as well. It's gonna bring out those natural sugars. I'm gonna add, where's my black pepper? Give this a little bit of a sprinkle. And then give your sweet potato a little massage. It needs love. It's the holiday season. We could all use a little love like this sweet potatoes. All right, so I've got these all seasoned up. I've got a little more olive oil on my baking tray over here. We're gonna put them face down. That way, the flat sides get really nicely caramelized. I've got my oven preheated to 400 degrees. We're gonna roast these for about 25 to 30 minutes on the middle rack. That way they get nice and evenly cooked in the oven. Unfortunately, I did not wake up Ina Garten today again, so these, I don't have them pre-cooked. We're just gonna have to wait for them to finish naturally. So while our sweet potatoes are roasting, we're gonna get started on our pesto. Something that we're gonna need that's a fun little seasonal treat, instead of a traditional pine nut or walnut, we're gonna use toasted hazelnuts. So I need a whole ½ cup of these for the entire recipe. So measure them out. We're gonna give these a quick chop. We're gonna use half of these in the pesto, and then we're gonna use half of them to toss in with our gnocchi at the end. It's gonna add a really delightful textural contrast. So we're gonna give these just a rough chop. Nothing too crazy. They don't roll all over my counter. All right, I've chopped up my hazelnuts. I'm gonna add them to a pan. I've got it over a medium to low heat. And we're just gonna add them in here. And you're gonna wanna keep an eye on these. These will burn faster than you think. So keep it nice and low. And we're just gonna toast these until they're nicely golden brown and aromatic, and they will get aromatic. It's gonna smell like the holidays. I'm Jewish, but I think there's a song that goes, chestnuts roasting, hazelnuts roasting on a pan. All right, so you can see our hazelnuts are beautifully toasted. I wish you could smell how this room smells right now between the hazelnuts and the sweet potatoes in the oven. It just smells like the holidays. So I'm going to take a 1/4 cup of these from my pesto, and we're gonna save the rest for later. Now it's time to talk pesto. So we're doing a sage pesto. I did a little bit of experimenting with this one, trying a few different flavor combinations. Does it need a little of this? Does it need a little bit of that? And I found the best balance was using sage, parsley, and basil. Now why those 3? Sage, I wanted to be the star. So we're using a ½ cup of sage. We're using a 1/4 cup of parsley. It's gonna give it a little more body to the pesto. And then I'm adding some basil because it's, first of all, it's classic in pesto. It's gonna add more body. And third, it's gonna add a brightness to sort of contrast the flavors of the sage and the parsley. So let's get started making it. I've got my mise en place all ready. We're gonna start with a ½ cup of our sage. Just drop it right on in. I've got that 1/4 cup of our parsley. Make sure you wash your herbs, folks. Everybody into the blender. And then I've got a 4th cup of my basil. Get that all in there. We're gonna add a 4th cup of our toasted hazelnuts. Like I said earlier, we're substituting that instead of like a traditional pine nut or a walnut because it's a little more festive, a little more seasonal. And then I've got a ½ cup of really good extra virgin olive oil. We're gonna add about a 1/4 teaspoon of salt. Do it to your palate. If you think you need a little bit more, do a little bit more. I like it a little bit salty. We're gonna add a dash of black pepper in here. And this one's optional. I like to add a little bit of heat, so I'm gonna add about a 1/4 teaspoon of crushed red pepper flake. And then we're gonna add the juice of half a lemon. Just squeeze it right in there. Make sure you catch the seeds before they fall in. And that's gonna add a little bit more brightness. It's really gonna pull out more of the flavors of those herbs too and give it a nice contrast as well. Pop on your top. And you can use whatever you have on hand. If you have a blender, a food processor, I've got our NutriBullet over here. This is not a paid advertisement. And we're gonna give this a little whirl. Maybe I'll mute this part. So something I always have to do, really, is taste my food as I go. I gave my pesto a taste and I realized I forgot the garlic, which is a really important part of this pesto. So I just gave it a quick chop to give it a little bit of help. I'm just gonna add it back into our pesto, give it a whirl, and incorporate that garlic flavor that we need. And we're done. So we're gonna leave this on the counter. It can just sort of sit and marinate in itself. I think our sweet potatoes are done. Let's go check on those. All right. We got our sweet potatoes out of the oven. You're gonna wanna give it a little bit of a fork check. Here's how you're gonna know if it's ready. If your fork easily pierces through, it's ready. If it doesn't, put them back in the oven for another 10 minutes or so. We're gonna flip them over, and look at that. That's what we're looking for. That's gonna add so much flavor to our sweet potato gnocchi, you don't even understand. So we're gonna let these cool, and then we're gonna get gnocchiing. Gnocchiing. Okay, our sweet potatoes are finally cool. I'm gonna scoop them out carefully and place them into this bowl. Well, I'm just gonna get dirty. Don't be afraid to get dirty. Whoever said don't play with your food was a really boring person. I'm just gonna get my hands in here and scoop the flesh out of here. Beautiful. Just try and get every last bit. It really is so delicious. We're gonna start mashing these guys up. I've got my fork over here. All right, let's get mashing. You really just wanna smash these up until they're nice and smooth. Especially those caramelized bits. They may be a little bit harder to mash, but just be diligent. It'll come together. And we want this nice and smooth so that way, when we're rolling out our gnocchi dough, there's no lumps. Okay, now comes the fun part. It's time to start making our gnocchi dough. On a clean surface, I'm gonna actually spray a little bit of some nonstick cooking spray, and I'm gonna get just a little bit of a dusting of our gluten-free flour from Bob's Red Mill, and I'm gonna scoop out our sweet potato mixture that we've all mashed up. Try and get every last bit. Amazing. And we're gonna do this kind of like how we would do a regular pasta. So we're gonna use between 1 cup and 1.5 cups, slowly, gradually adding 1/4 at a time, just until the dough comes together. So I'm just gonna start probably with a 1/2 cup to give us the beginning here. And I'm gonna make, like we would do with a regular pasta dough, I'm gonna make a little well, like that. Don't be afraid to get messy, kids. I've got 1 egg, I'm gonna drop that in, and I'm gonna add just a pinch of salt for a little extra flavor. Beautiful. And we're gonna use our fork and just start to incorporate that egg into the flour and sweet potato. Eventually, you're just gonna get your hands in there and get nice and messy until the dough starts to come together. You know what? Here we go. And just start incorporating everything together. It is going to be a bit sticky at first. That's why we're gradually adding the flour. We're gonna do it until it's no longer sticky. All right, I'm gonna get my hands in there. It's super important to really knead your dough. That's gonna really help, especially with the gluten-free flour. It's really gonna help to build up that elasticity that's missing because there's no real gluten in this. If you're using a flour that doesn't have xanthan gum already in it, I would recommend using about 1/4 teaspoon per 1 cup of flour. That's gonna really help build up the elasticity that's missing in our gluten-free flour. So it's starting to come together. It is still quite sticky. So this is where we're gonna add another fourth cup of our flour mixture. So again, just kneading as we go, folding it into itself, really incorporating all of that flour. So far I've added 3/4 cup. You can still tell it's still pretty sticky. So we're gonna go in once again, another 1/4 cup, continuing that process. This is kind of an imperfect science because sweet potatoes range in sizes. So the trick is, the dough is probably gonna tell you when it can't take any more flour. If you think that it needs more flour, continue that process until it stops hanging on to those little bits. But really, you're looking for a little bit of a spring in it. The kneading is really gonna help that come through. So I'm just gonna keep playing with this. If I need to add more flour, I will. Again, it will vary. All right, my friends, I think our dough is just about ready. So our large sweet potato, 1 egg, and I did wind up using 1 1/4 cup of our gluten-free flour from Bob's Red Mill. I'm gonna pop this in a bowl and drizzle it with a little bit of olive oil. And we're gonna pop this in the freezer for just a few minutes, just so it can cool off. It's gonna be a lot easier to roll out if it's chilled. We've let our sweet potato gnocchi dough rest in the freezer. I'm gonna pull that out because it's time to get rolling. So we're gonna pop this back on our countertop. I've greased it again. We're gonna cut this into quarters. That way it's easier to roll out. And one at a time, we're gonna roll these into little balls. And because we added that olive oil, it's gonna be easier to roll out. Just start rolling it out, pinching and rolling as we go. If you have to cheat a little bit by pinching, that works too. Pinch and press, it'll give you the same result. All right, so it looks like we've got this all rolled out. This is like about the thickness that you want. About a 1/2 inch thick. And the texture you're looking for, it's gonna be like a little harder than Play-Doh, but softer than when you're testing your meat. You know that trick? It's gonna be a little bit softer than that. You want the dough to have a little bit of a spring to it. That means the elasticity has really developed. Next thing I'm gonna do with a knife, I'm just gonna carefully just start breaking these off into these cute little pieces. You'll get these little edges over here. And they don't need to be perfect. Gnocchi, something that I love about it is that it's quite rustic. They're gonna puff up a little bit, so don't cut them too big. And so you don't damage your countertop. Use the back of your knife. Great. And something that I like to do as well so they don't stick together is just give them a little bit of a dusting. And then we're just gonna pop it back into our bowl and continue this process. Give this a shimmy shake. We want to get them nicely coated with the flour so that they don't stick together when we're boiling them. Okay, perfect. Back into the freezer for just a few minutes to tighten up, and then it's time to boil and toss them in that pesto. Okay, our gnocchi are just about ready to get cooking. I'm gonna season my boiling water with a little bit of olive oil to prevent them from sticking, and a gratuitous amount of salt. You're gonna wanna have your spider ready, carefully, as you can. And they're gonna start to rise to the top, probably gonna be about 2 minutes or so. I also have another pan on a medium heat. I'm gonna get some olive oil in there. To this olive oil, I'm gonna add 2 things. I have a little bit of extra sage and I've got some garlic. So I'm gonna drop a little piece of garlic in there. And I'm just gonna crisp up some of these sage leaves. Just get it super aromatic. When these are done and they've risen to the top, we're gonna use our spider, pull them out, drop them in the oil. All right, friends, come see what's happening. So we've had these boiling for just about 2 minutes or so. They are naturally starting to rise to the top. We are going to carefully, very carefully, take them with our spider, drain the excess liquid. You're gonna wanna sear these up, just get them a little bit brown. Be super careful when you're cooking them though, because they are sweet potatoes and they do have natural sugars, they do tend to caramelize quickly. You don't want to burn them. So keep your eye on them, keep them on a medium-low heat, and just keep tossing them around in that beautiful oil infused with that sage and that garlic. When these are all toasted up, we're going to fold in some of our pesto and our leftover hazelnuts. Ooh. So these have gotten gorgeously browned. Our next step, I'm gonna lower this heat just a hair. I'm going to add a good amount of our pesto that we made earlier. And the second that it hits the pan, it is going to get so aromatic in here. I'm gonna give these a little toss. I mean, come on. And then I'm gonna toss in some of my crushed hazelnuts. Again, it's gonna give it such a nice textural contrast between the soft, pillowy chewiness and that crunch of the hazelnuts. Wow. And we are just about ready to plate, and more importantly, eat. Let's turn that heat off. And let's try, I'm gonna be as delicate as possible getting these into this bowl. Just gently pop them in. Okay, we're gonna give it a shot. Get a little bit of that hazelnut. You gotta give this a try. And there you have it. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in for this week's Make It Monday. I'm Matt, aka Glass of Weinstein. I hope you give it a try. If you do, tag me, shoot me a message, let me know how it goes. Thank you to Serena and the whole team at Bob's Red Mill. I really hope that you enjoyed this sweet potato gnocchi with sage pesto. I know that I will. So good.